This happened when I was about 15 years old, back in 2008. My parents went out to the casino for the night, so it was just me and my dog, Abby, home alone. It was about 11 p.m., and I was messaging some friends on Instant Messenger and watching YouTube videos. As I was typing and chatting away, I heard Abby barking at something in the living room. I figured it might be my parents getting home, so I just waited. After about a minute or so of more barking and no sound of the door opening, I got up and went into the living room to check it out. Abby was facing the windows that looked out onto our driveway, still barking. I couldn't really see outside because the lights were off, and it was really dark. I peered through the window and saw only the one car in our driveway, so I knew my parents hadn't come home yet. I chalked it up to Abby possibly hearing a neighbor's car door slam shut or a particularly loud car driving by, as we lived on a main road with lots of noise, even late at night. I went back to messaging my friends, but over the next 5 minutes, I kept feeling like I heard noises around my house. Abby would stop and start barking again at different intervals. I was about to get up and calm her down when I could have sworn I heard a knocking sound at the front door. I slowly made my way back into the living room to look through the windows again. Nothing. I was starting to get a little nervous, and I was too scared to look into the peephole in case some crazy face was staring back at me. I double-checked to make sure the door was locked and was about to leave the room when the sound of knocking suddenly came from the side door of my house. I didn't know what to think. Was someone trying to break in? Was it more than one person? I barely had time to register those thoughts when I heard the sound of the doorknob downstairs being jimmied, like someone was trying to get in. The entrance to our basement from outside was pretty hidden. To get to that door, you had to walk around the entire house, into our backyard, and go under the deck. You would either need to already know the door was there, or be really determined to find a way in. Abby was whimpering and barking louder than ever, running from room to room trying to locate the threat. It felt like the whole house was surrounded. The noises from the basement grew louder, and it almost sounded like whoever it was had managed to get the door open because suddenly the noise stopped. I held my breath and stood frozen in silence, waiting for the next sound. Then Abby flew down the stairs and started growling maniacally at whatever was down there. She was a good-natured black lab who had never hurt a fly, but in this moment, I had never heard her sound more threatening. It felt like I was frozen there for hours. Finally, my fight or flight instinct kicked in when I realized Abby had stopped barking and growling. I called for her upstairs and locked the door inside the house that led to the basement. I grabbed the home phone and ran with Abby into the closet of my parents' room, where one of the guns we owned was stored. I sat there, armed and ready, about to call 911, when I heard the sounds of the front door burst open. Abby immediately sprinted out. I screamed for her to stop, but then I heard the sounds of my parents' voices. I ran into the living room to see them petting her and looking at me strangely. I spent the next several minutes recounting the events of the night to my parents. My mother was horrified, and my dad spent the next hour searching every corner of the house, inside and out, with his gun in hand. We didn't find anything, and I didn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. My dad opened it to find my Uncle Pete standing there with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Pete was a narcissistic creep, to say the least. He had always mistreated my aunt and acted very weird around the kids and cousins at family parties. Nothing illegal as far as we knew, but he just had this way about him. You knew to try to avoid him growing up. So I always felt a bit anxious whenever he talked to me. I played softball, and his daughter, my cousin, Kate, played in a league a few years below mine. I loved my cousin, and I always felt bad for her, having such a creepy father. So I would often give her tips or help her team out with pitching and fielding lessons. My mother and I waited around the corner, eavesdropping, and we heard Uncle Pete say something like, "I tried to stop by last night to drop it off, but no one was home." Shortly after, my dad slammed the door shut. My mother stepped out and asked what happened. My dad, his face quivering with anger, said that apparently Uncle Pete had been the one stomping around the house last night, trying to get inside. He handed me the envelope, and I opened it to find a card with a gift card inside, thanking me for helping his daughter with softball lessons. A night of panic and terror, all at the hands of my creepy uncle. My dad had threatened him on his way out, and after that, we never really spent time with him again. Thinking about this story now, I'm glad I found out who was behind the incident. Otherwise, I might have spent years wondering if it had been burglars, a ghost, or something else. I'm thankful Abby was there to protect me. She most certainly helped to scare him off. But even so, I'm left with so many questions. Why would he want to drop off a card so late at night? And why wouldn't he get the hint that we weren't home when no one answered the door? Why didn't he try calling the house to see if we were home? And worst of all, what would have happened if he had gotten inside? I once worked as a direct care aide for a 65-year-old woman with a developmental disability. Her daughter, Colleen, who was in her 40s and needed someone with medical experience to watch her mother overnight. When I say I worked for them, I mean I literally worked just one night. And you're about to hear why I never went back. The 65-year-old woman's name was Martha, and Colleen was the one who contacted me. It's possible Colleen didn't have any other family to watch her, and she didn't want to or couldn't afford to put Martha in a nursing home. It's also possible she felt more comfortable hiring someone with experience to care for her. At the time, I was already a direct care worker for 2 other women with developmental disabilities, so I had experience. But nothing could have prepared me for that night. Colleen left for work earlier that day. I had already worked my first job, so I was pushing my body to exhaustion, trying to make as much money as possible. Colleen introduced me to Martha, who gave me a smile before Colleen took her upstairs to her bedroom for the night. It was around 9 or 10 p.m. Colleen told me that Martha sometimes walked around the house at night, acting confused, and that I would need to calm her down and bring her back to her room. She specifically told me that this wasn't sleepwalking, but a symptom of her mother's dementia. I reassured her that I would know how to handle it. At first, I spent my time in the living room catching up on a show. These jobs aren't glamorous, and for the most part, it's a lot of sitting around. After a while, I heard footsteps from upstairs. I went to the staircase and looked up, calling Martha's name, and asked if she needed anything. There was no answer, but I heard footsteps going back to her room and the door closing. Maybe she went to the bathroom, I thought. So I went back to the living room and watched more TV. About an hour later, I got up to grab a sandwich I had brought from the fridge. As I left the kitchen with my plate and sandwich, I nearly had a heart attack when I saw Martha standing in the doorway. Glass shattered everywhere. I apologized and asked if she was okay. She started yelling at me. "Who are you?" I reminded her who I was. I was her direct care worker, here to make sure she was okay. And she just kept screaming. I tried to remind her that we had just met, and that her daughter, Colleen, had hired me to watch her and the house. This finally seemed to calm her, long enough to become comfortable enough going back upstairs. I brought her a glass of water and some melatonin, making sure she took it before I went back downstairs. After a few hours, I was absolutely exhausted and needed a couple hours of sleep. There was a spare bedroom upstairs with a twin-sized bed where Colleen had said I could rest if I needed. I figured that Martha was asleep for the night after the melatonin, so I allowed myself to fall asleep quickly. But after only about an hour, I woke up to a sound from downstairs. It was a repeated slamming noise. Every 1 or 2 seconds, something downstairs was being slammed. I jumped out of bed, having left the bedroom door open so I could hear if Martha got up. As I reached the stairs, I realized that the slamming was coming from the kitchen. I rushed down the stairs as quietly as I could, and when I reached the bottom, I peered around the corner into the kitchen. What I saw was like a scene from a scary movie. Martha was standing in front of the oven, repeatedly opening it and slamming it shut. It was so dark in the kitchen that she was only a silhouette. I called her name loudly, and she stopped. She turned to her left and shut the oven door one final time before walking toward me, heading for the stairs. I asked in a soft and scared voice if she was okay. She got close enough that I could see her face, which was blank and expressionless, before she passed me and started up the staircase. I decided to follow her, and as soon as she reached her bedroom, she slammed the door shut. I knocked softly, asking if she was all right, but she didn't respond. I quietly opened the door just enough to peek inside, and there was Martha standing at the side of her bed, facing the wall. It was one of the most unsettling things I'd ever witnessed. I walked over to her, gently easing her to the bed and covering her with a blanket. I hoped that this would be the final time I said goodnight and shut her door. I crossed the hall to the spare room and tried to lay down again. I purposefully stayed awake for at least a half an hour just in case she woke back up, and eventually I fell asleep. Later, I woke up, but the room was still pitch black. I didn't know what had woken me up until I heard a sound coming from inside my closet. The door was cracked open, and there was the black shadow of a head peeking out. My heart almost stopped. "Martha?" I called softly, but she didn't answer. I called her name again and again, until finally she pushed the door open. She slowly started crossing to the bed, repeating the same things she had said hours ago. "Who are you? I don't know you. Who are you? Where did you come from?" As she got closer, I tried to calm her down and remind her who I was. I fumbled to turn on the lamp next to the bed, and to my horror, Martha held a huge kitchen knife. At that moment, everything changed. Martha was now a threat to my life, and I had to worry about protecting myself, not her. I screamed for her to put the knife down, and her screaming seemed to escalate. She started moving closer, repeating over and over, "I don't know you. I don't know you." It was not in my job description to try and calm down a knife-wielding dementia patient. I quickly mapped out an escape route around her and went for it. I jumped from the bed to the far side of the room and bolted out of the door. She screamed again, "Who are you?" and swung the knife in the air as I ran past. I made it downstairs, grabbed my shoes, and ran out of the house. Instead of calling 911, I called Colleen, as she had told me to do if anything came up. She started screaming into the phone, telling me I couldn't leave. But honestly, I yelled back, saying that her mother had tried to kill me. Colleen ended up leaving work early to come home. I stayed there outside the house, keeping an eye on Martha to make sure that she didn't leave. When Colleen returned, she went inside to check on Martha, who was back in bed, asleep. She accused me of exaggerating the whole situation until she found the knife next to Martha's bed. I decided not to mention that I had gone to sleep for a while earlier. I figured she would just end up blaming me for what had happened, and I didn't feel I had done anything wrong. She was the one who brought up which room I could lay down in. But anyway, I never went back there, and I never worked for them again. In my 9 years as a direct care aide, the scariest patient I've ever dealt with by far was Martha.